Okay, so we're going to call to order now. We have one committee member who is en route, and so we'll start, and then Alex will join us in progress. Thank you all for joining. This is the first ad hoc committee serving or investigating the Harvard Westlake River Park project for the Weddington site of the new term of the Studio City Neighborhood Council. The old committee expired June 30th, 23 with the outgoing board. We were not able to start a new committee until we were all sworn in on July 16th. So as of July 16th or so, this is the new committee that has been selected. Thank you all for your service. I'm going to go through attendance. Chip Meehan, I am here. Alexander Black, en route. Peter Cole. Here. Jeff Hartwig. Here. Michael Kapolsky. Here. Heidi McKay. Here. Lori Rittenberg. Here. And Scott. Present. There. Okay, it's 7:08. So this is the first meeting we've been able to put together. We know that with this particular project, timing is of the essence, and we officially ceased to exist in our last incarnation, which was, I think, the 3rd or 4th, on June 30th. So in the interest of keeping conversations going before we were able to legitimately put an ad hoc together, 3 board members, Scott, the president, me, the VP, and Jeff, the corresponding secretary, have met twice with Harvard Westlake between the end of the last term and the beginning of this term to try to keep things moving forward, to get some clarity on some issues out there that were either misunderstood or where there had been no information and we thought we would clarify some things. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Bring you guys up to speed on what we found, what we didn't find and we'd still like to see. And then from there, the committee can kind of figure out what we think would be an appropriate path moving forward, if any. Keep in mind the official position of the Neighborhood Council. I think we all got another copy of the motion today, is that the Studio City Neighborhood Council cannot support the project as it currently stands because of too many unresolved issues. So that's where we are. We are not in support at this point. Can you wait for public comment?
No, I just have a question about the procedure. What your goal is it eventually to have a community impact statement written right when the council file comes out, probably September, so we can be moving on the ad hoc committee through the legislature of the neighborhood council to have a community impact report ready when the council file is.
Well, the council file issue is when? September. The initial thought, well, let's go hold that question and then we'll call that public comment on non-agenda items. So we'll hold up like what were we trying to do when we get there. Okay. Are there any other public comments? Sir.
Is this general public comment?
It is.
Okay, how much time do I have?
How about 60 seconds?
Okay, are you timing it?
I can go over and do that right now.
Please do. I don't want to be a racist about it.
There you go.
You want to do the time? No, I'm going to be doing research.
Just tell me when and tell me at 10 seconds so I don't go.
You got it. Fire away.
Thank you very much for holding this. If you're in Van Nuys Neighborhood Council, they would not do any of this. They would be as ignorant, stupid, and untrustworthy as possible. Yeah, thank you very much for the supporting documents. Thanks for trying your best regarding the resources that you are able to do. Thank you very much for being as transparent as possible. In Van Nuys, they don't do that. They hate people. They don't like white cracker Republican conservatives like me. If you ask a question, you're a racist and a bully. Just can't go forward. Ramen noodle shows up there, but they didn't show up here, and shows up in Sherman Oaks. So at least you're trying your best. Just say what's the facts and make people their own determination. But if you want to know how to fail, just come over to Van Nuys Neighborhood Council and you can learn from them on how to fuck up a junkyard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Any other public comment?
I'm going to wait till Barry gets in. Public comment? Oh, we get it. No, that's fine.
Is this, oh,
Okay.
this is not, this is separate from the other one? I thought that was just a question. Is this the?
There's a lot of people in line behind you, Patty. You're being really selfish.
Is there anybody else on the ad hoc committee and, or is this it plus Alexander?
Plus Alexander.
Wasn't Terry on here?
Terry had been.
And now she's not.
Yes.
Did she resign?
I didn't ask Terry to join us for this new incarnation.
Is that policy where you're on committee, you can not come?
Well, this is a new committee. Committee heads are chosen, committee chairs are chosen by the president. The president can then make the decision to either empower the committee chair to fill the committee or fill the committee for the committee chair. Scott has elected, since he's been president last year, to let the chairs of the committee select the people that would be on that committee. So that's what I did. In this particular situation, I just thought, based on history, it was better that Terry not be part of this committee studying the topic because she has exposure and an effort in a different organization. And there are times there's some conflict.
So would that have precluded her from joining in the first place?
I don't want to get into that simply because
I don't either. I just am curious that a member that was sitting was not invited to one particular meeting. I don't understand how that would be.
well, this isn't one particular meeting. This is the beginning of a 2-year term for
So
this.
she's no longer on the committee whatsoever.
She's no longer on the ad hoc committee.
I see. I'm not sure I understand how that would happen, but I think you try to explain it.
Yeah, well, because I thought it would be better, and it's my committee. So that's what I decided.
An extension to my
It's
question.
our committee.
No, it's my committee.
The neighborhood council is a council of the community of Studio City.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So it's our committee.
Yes, but as the chair of the committee, I get to choose who's going to be on it.
Yes, I think you've done that.
I just had one extension to my question. So if somebody else wanted to join, a new person, are you accepting people to be on it for future, or are you closed? Because I didn't see any advertising to go back on it. I have one person
I
in
can
mind.
give some clarification on that. I announced at the last board meeting all the committees and explained to people who were physically here how to apply to be on every single committee. I also did an email blast. So there are people who did then respond to the open positions of the committee.
So at this point, if someone totally new wanted to join, is that a possibility or no?
They can send the letter of interest to the committee chair and copy me
Okay,
for any committee that we have,
okay.
including this committee, any committee.
So going back to your first question, yes, sir.
Very simple. Did you follow bylaws and what your actions were lawful for what you did on who you chose? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's the end of it. Thank you.
Thank you. So what was the intent of the effort to speak with Harvard Westlake in the interim between that and now? There's an awful lot of issues that needed to be clarified. Access was one, right? So we wanted to talk to them about access. We also wanted to talk to them about some of the issues that were floating around about the Zev Greenway. There were also some other issues about generally moving forward, because we just can't keep reconstituting all of these ad hocs because they take too much time. What would we end up doing moving forward long term? So we were going to meet with them about all of those issues. We go back. So we discussed access. Oh, so as far as what are we trying to get to, right? It was my opinion that this is moving in favor of Harvard Westlake. So the idea was to see what sort of concession we can get before they actually had any more approvals, when they were still feeling vulnerable and might be willing to give us some kind of concessions that would be favorable to the community moving forward. So it made sense at the same time we're getting clarity on outstanding issues to find out what else we might be able to get. So those two purposes were there. If we were able to get something, right? So we wanted to get all of that clarified so that the public would have the information we're going to share tonight prior to the 824 CPC meeting and to aid in their comments. Access, for example. Right, there's a lot of questions there. Alan?
Yeah, Chair, just so the committee knows, we are in conversations with Harvard Westlake trying to come to some sort of agreement on how they scale it back and make absolutely clear the community what it is they plan to do there. That's an ongoing process. I'll be happy to sort of coordinate with you on that.
Sure. That would be great. So let me start with the access questions. Patty?
You said it's moving in the favor of Harvard Westlake. Where do you get that from?
Well, some of the other planning committee meetings I've been to, I've yet to see the planning committee send anything back, like the last one we were at where they rubber stamped 10 in a row. Also, the Upper River, some of the river committees, I forget the name of the acronym that goes with that. There were a number of other city departments that moved to approve the project in a non-bonding approval for the project itself. So they seem to be ticking things off. Still wanted to talk to them. Wanted to get clarity on access. So do you want to talk about access? So there is a spectrum of access to the facility itself, from full access to fully locked down, right? Neither one is really appropriate. Full access is going to create a tremendous burden. If they just threw it up and it became a giant regional park, there would be a tremendous burden on the neighborhood in terms of people from all over Los Angeles coming in. We also wouldn't know who they were. So I agree that they need to have some kind of an idea about, for safety and security, to know who's there. In following the thinking on that particular issue, if we take a look at the pool, for example, the pool will be open to the public. There will be an agency, the YMCA, for example, and I believe that's who they're going with. It has not been solved. The YMCA will run lifeguards, security. The lifeguards will run, Alex, you're up here. Alexander Black is here. So in looking at the swim amenities, they described how that would work. How there would be, for example, and this is hypothetical, we have yet to see, although we've asked to see, a calendar and a clock showing what's there. But hypothetically, in the pool from 6 to 9 a.m. would be senior swim or swim, right? Where there would just be swim time, there would be a lifeguard. You would need to be a YMCA member, which costs $20. Anyone in the community can do that. And that's how you get access to the pool.
It's like $70.
Okay, whatever. But I don't know, right? So there was that. Then the idea would be that the Y would run some sort of other programs in the morning, right? And then in the afternoon, Harvard Westlake would take over. So that was sort of the explanation for why the YMCA was involved. There also is the comment from Harvard Westlake that at some point in there where there are not structured programs, swim programs, safety programs, there would be open swim time where there would be a lifeguard and you would need to have some level of approval to get in and use the pool. So there's that piece of it. Other structured pieces we talked about were the leagues and the Angel City Sports and that sort of stuff. I understand why those are going there. We also discussed pop-ups. So would it be possible for a group of us to get together and decided that we wanted to play basketball? And so there is going to be some way for residents or people that are maybe not Studio City residents to go up and identify yourself as a club, and there will be access to the facility with some sort of club, some sort of registration, and people will have access to the field houses, that sort of thing. Pardon me?
It's big.
That's really big.
It is big. It's going to be big.
And it doesn't include the insurance issue.
Which is the insurance issue?
Well, in the FEIR, it says that the people who come have to be insured. So there's a whole list of.
There is, and there needs to be and we're not going to be able to solve those particular pieces now since they haven't broken ground. There needs to be another working group that moves forward. One of the things we discussed with them on that is it's very possible just by signing a waiver, here's your name, here's your driver's license, here's the waiver, that covers them and you can go in. You don't need to show, the intent, as I've been told, is not to have a Lloyd's of London certificate to then let you get in there, but they don't want to be liable for any theft.
Actually, they do that out in Paseo where I go play tennis. I have to sign every time I go there.
Right. And it would be that sort of program.
Most facilities.
Pardon me?
Most facilities, summer camps are doing it.
Right, and so that was the clarity we had, that it wasn't meant to be anything more formal than what exists in convention in other facilities. But we have asked to see what the particular schedule of events is. We have not seen it. We know that American football games will not happen on the lower facility, but we don't know what else will happen down there.
Did you ask about football practice?
Did not ask about football practice in particular.
Can I ask one question or make
Sure.
one point? Just to back up as a foundational matter. I agree with you that City Planning Commission, Plum, City Council, they seem to be rubber stamping everything. But there isn't, and I wasn't at those river committee meetings. I never got notice of them. I don't know how I never got notice of them, but I never did. I don't think I did anyway. Maybe I did, but anyway. But just to back up a moment, there is a distinction between this project and projects of the last planning commission. I think most of those were housing, and that's what we were trying to pare back, and some of the other communities were trying to do that as well. And we don't have to deal with low income housing here. So it is a big difference. It is a big difference when you're, replacing, green open space with what they're trying to do versus putting in more housing with low income and all the densities that apply. So I just want to make that point. I guess maybe I'm still a little too optimistic. I don't know, but I would still like to see some maybe changes to the site plan.
And to that, just want to add to that, it also needs a CUP as opposed to what the others need. And the CUP in this case, which I unfortunately cannot get right in my hands here, it has to qualify. And the first thing out there is it has to be a benefit to the community. So this could be why Harvard at the last minute, it seems like it's saying, oh, well, no, you can come and swim. Where up to this point, as far as we all know from the FEIR, it was only pre-approved groups. Now, all of a sudden, they're saying, oh, no, if you sign a waiver, you can come and swim. And obviously, we would need these more like in the CUP or some kind of writing so they can't just in 2 years or 3 years when it's done, say, never mind. It has to be enforced in some way.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally agree. And I think many things can be true at the same time. I think that They are probably more amenable to details right now than they might have been prior. I also think that no one's really asked them. I mean, there haven't been, I mean, I don't know if there have been a bunch of community, hold on, Secretary, a whole bunch of community efforts saying, can you guys lay out what the plan is? So that's what we've asked. Now, again, we haven't seen a schedule of events. These are happening uphill. These are happening down. We've asked for that. We haven't seen it. Terry.
When somebody mentioned about, or when you, I'm sorry, Chip, when you mentioned about that there might be something that you can sign a waiver and then you can come on the property. In the FEIR, the actual language says only pre-approved community groups or swim program members, when not in use by the school, a group would consist of any organization or league that has a registration process, provides trained staffing and or coaching, provides supervision commensurate with its activities and number of participants, maintains liability insurance covering its participants, and has an executed up-to-date agreement in place with the school. I don't see why they'd be so specific in what they've put in writing to the city and then have some very lax sort of, just sign this and come on board. But I find that kind of suspect. And I think after 3 years of this program, that they would have had something more concrete if they did have a completely separate set of lack of liability concerns or just people coming on and off the property. So my concern would be not what they say and not giving any approvals or support for things that they say in meetings just with the two of you that no one else is at. I think that everything has to be in writing.
Well, it was 3 of us. Jeff was there as well.
Excuse me, 3. So
I'm not explaining this well, which is a bad start for the evening.
One of the variables is we have no input. We don't have a template of what a conditional use permit is like we do for every other project that comes before this neighborhood council. There's a conditional use permit for beverage or for any other use that is a template. It's like every other one before it. And there's very few changes. We have nothing in any of the records for a sports complex. There are no sports complexes with conditional use permits. In fact, there isn't one in the upper campus, right?
Right.
So we have nothing.
The other schools.
So we have nothing to base that upon. We've had zero input today, zero help from our council office, who should be working with us for this sort of unknown. How do you write a conditional use permit and when do you write it? We're talking with Harvard Westlake. We're not making decisions based upon anyone. We're trying to lay out a framework. So, because we were idle for quite some time in between the two boards, there was no committees. And we have the hearing coming up in just a couple of weeks. And I don't think anyone here knows what's going to come out of the City Planning Commission. Do you think they're going to have a typed out conditional use permit that specifies every single possible use of a project that right now is not even approved? I don't think so, but it's possible. So we're trying to form the bones of something for further negotiations for a project that may be open in 3 or more years. We're getting into such minutia right now of who these community groups are, and Harvard Westlake is telling us that they are going to work with us to come up with some type of a benefit to the public that isn't as rigid as it may say in the FEIR. Are they lying? I don't know. I don't think so. But what went into the FEIR is not what's coming out of city planning, because we don't know what's coming out of city planning. We don't even have the staff report yet that's being presented from Kimberly. Getting Sportsman's mixed up. Sorry, I almost said more song. We didn't know what was happening with Sportsman's until we got the staff report from More Song. We're not going to know what's happening with the staff recommendations to the City Planning Commission until we get the report from Kimberly. So we're spitballing ideas of what to bring to our council office and to city planning.
And so there were 4 buckets that we looked at. One was groups like the YMCA, and I don't know who else they would have, but it could be a YSO, it could be something like that, right? There are existing groups that have the sort of formalized thing that Terry just read. There also are the other regional groups like Special Olympics and Angel City Sports that they have made agreements with. And again, I am not sure if that is going to be only sort of quarterly, like a weekend, playoff bunch of games, or if there'll be practices. I'm not sure what that schedule is. I don't know if Harvard Westlake is. So we have the YMCA type, we have Angel City Sports type. There would be the pop-ups, which would be neighborhood groups that decided, I think we were talking about Silver Sneakers basketball, a bunch of 60-year-old guys dumping around from the neighborhood, playing basketball one night a week. That is the sort of thing that in discussions, they would be open to putting it together and making that available. They would want to know who the 10 old guys that were in there, so they knew where to take the body. And then, they would do what to do with all of that. But so that's sort of where that went with pop-ups. And then there was also the second time we went back to them and we talked about free time is what we've been looking for. They didn't have an answer in the first meeting. In the second meeting, they said, yeah, so free swim. So maybe there would be a period of time when there wasn't, and that's sort of where the idea of the morning came up, right? So you're not going to have kids swim till after the older kids get dropped off in this idyllic little example. So maybe in the morning, there would be free swim where you could go down there and do laps, hypothetically, but there would be a lifeguard there. And so those are the sort of buckets that were looked at. The other conversation was about balancing access and neighborhood serenity, right? Balancing access and what they're going to use with their own property. And the idea was to start small and see what in the early days and months could be handled. And then maybe it'd be able to say, oh, there's the opportunity for another league or another pop-up or something like that. It could be expanded. It would be more likely to add something over time than start off with a full calendar and then have them say, or the neighborhood say, this is too much, start canceling these programs. So this is why there needs to be, I call the steering committee, it drives Scott crazy because there is no steering committee lexicon in Roberts, but there needs to be a group that works with the neighborhood and Harvard Westlake to make those decisions. And that won't be for years.
On CUP, Chip, if I may, up on the main campus, they are operating under a CUP. And so there is
yes.
The problem not there is that they Coldwater County has raised the question time and time again that they keep adding additional things that they've got. They've got many CUPs. They keep modifying it, including to it. This is not a way to design a CUP. And they're on an obligation. Harvard Westlake is the applicant to put that complex there. And they are obligated, Torture Concordia, to do the same thing. You have to apply for CUP, go in the secret process, and they're obligated to that because as a private school, you cannot take over a piece of property which is zoned agricultural. You can't do it. Public schools can, private schools can't. So that's the framework we're operating. And they are obligated, they're not doing us any favor, they have to do it this way. Get your CUP out there. There's a form in there, I'll show the form in the initial documentation. What are your special projects? They have not answered that even now. So I think you should hold your feet to the fire, tell us what you plan to do on that property. And they still haven't answered that question. And with the years we've been talking to them, they have never come back with a definitive answer. And echoing what Terry here said, it's all talk, there's nothing in writing. And they're obligated in one of the city's own form where they say what exactly they plan to do. They still haven't answered that. And we will be talking to them later on this month, saying, you guys got to come to me, tell everybody in the community what that you plan to do there. It's not rocket science, so stand fast, members of the committee. You're on good, safe ground going forward.
Just to add to that, yes, the Krikorian said from the very, very beginning, they have to have a CUP to get this through. So we know that. And I'm looking right here, I don't know, the CUP, at least, I don't know where this is, but this, I think, is going to be the CUP. They have to, and the first thing they have to do with the project will enhance the built environment in the surrounding neighborhood, or will perform a function or provide a service that is essential or beneficial to the community, city, or region. The project, number 2, the project location, size, height, operations, and other significant features will be compatible with and not adversely affect or further degrade adjacent properties, the surrounding neighborhood, or the public health, welfare, and safety. I think number 2 we can have some issues with easily. And number 3, the project substantially conforms with the purpose, intent, and provisions of the general plan, the applicable community plan, and any applicable specific plan. So they have, this is their obstacle. So and it concerns me that you think the CPC is just going to go for this, because they didn't for their first one on Coldwater, and everybody thought they were.
I believe that there is the bones of a CUP in the FEIR. Right? Isn't there already something in the FEIR that is the bones of a CUP?
No.
But I agree. I mean,
we've read every page, and I didn't see it.
And I showed those same 3 points to them when we spoke to them.
What are you talking about? I think it's called the findings. Well, it's not. One thing I just wanted to follow up with what I was saying is, in the general plan, Weddington is open space. There's a map of the general plan, and it's privately owned open space, which means green. So I don't know how this project, which is basically full of plastic mats and concrete, equals open space.
And walls.
And walls. And walls all around. So that is the big hurdle, I think, one of the biggest hurdles they have to get over. And that might be a place where you guys could go if you're having conversations with them and ask them to make it smaller. Take out a field.
We've had that conversation, and this goes back to when we came up with the 2 ad hocs ago, when we came out with the motion in opposition. And then Scott and I at that point went over the week after. Remember that we had 300 people, 260 people on that Zoom call. We met with them over at the golf course, presented them a 6-page letter with all the issues. It's in the links on the agenda. These are all the issues. Is it for sale? Would it ever be for sale? Would you ever cut anything back? Right? We've gone through all of that, and they've steadfastly told us no.
But because they've said...
Well, if they say no, I'm not going to keep asking the question. I hear what you're saying, but we've gone down that road. And so we said we need to change it. They're saying no.
In our opposition, let's say, to the project, if they have said no time and again, not only to us, but also to Brahmin and to Kokorian, who's also asked them to make it smaller, doesn't that...
I believe the current plan.
Shout to privilege.
I think the current plan, right, as far as they're saying, with the current plan we're looking at, they reflect as a response to Paul saying before the January 2020 letter, it needs to be smaller. So when they got rid of the 3rd gym and the 2nd pool,
there was never a second pool.
There was, but it's in the documents. We've seen it. But
where?
It was an extension of the same.
It's in the link, and it was before the clubhouse was.
So it was stuff that they put in to take out. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't know. Either way, I've told you the conversation we had with them about what the activity would look like, and as far as that was able to go. They explained the thinking behind a Harvard Westlake sanctioned group, and that apparently wasn't their language. That came from the planning department. But you can see why someone like the YMCA would be a mechanism to execute that access. right? We know that they have the other two
Was it
leagues.
USTA one of them for tennis?
USTA is now one of them as well for tennis, thank you. So we can see, they don't want to run an athletic facility for the public, so they're going to have USTA do that. So we can see how that happened. We did get them to agree that pop-up groups for the community would have.
Let's go back to the size. They did, yes, they did reduce the gym by one field.
Floor.
And they did give us the clubhouse. What they did do, though, is they took the entire thing that they had and they moved it over to Bel Air. They gave no property up, they gave no size up, and they had a forest there before, a little park forest on the Bel Air side. That's gone. They moved everything over to Bel Air, so they gave nothing with that reducing it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Jim, I'll send you the actual form that is issued under the scoping meeting that they're obligated to follow. Read that over, lays out very clearly for the benefit of the community here, exactly what they are supposed to do. I'll send it over to you.
Okay, so there are 4 lumps, 4 buckets of access that we discussed with them that will need to be finalized.
But it's not a discussion, it's they have to comply what's in that form issued by the planning department. And that's what they're going to follow.
Okay.
Could we just let Chip just finish what he's saying and then we can have discussions afterward? Just let
So with those 4 buckets that will need to be finalized moving forward by another group, we also have been told that, so the upper campus, the high school campus, does not have a CUP. It existed prior to CUPs. There is a CUP for their lower school on the other side. I spoke to the Beverly Crest Bel Air Neighborhood Council, and I spoke to some people there about their relationship with Harvard Westlake and whether they were good citizens with regard to living by the terms of the CUP. Because we've had a situation where with Midland, for example, Midwood, where they basically just ignore the CUP over at Sportsman's and do whatever they want, so everyone's got a bad taste. The neighborhood council over the hill said that they do have a good and positive dialogue with Harvard Westlake, that Harvard Westlake does not rent out the facility, that they don't have parties that run overnight. It's an elementary school. I grant you, it's a totally different school, student and family base, but they come up clean based on that documentation. The caveat is there's been a Harvard Westlake person on the board of that neighborhood council for over 20 years. They also have somebody, but it's positive, potentially. They also have somebody from John Thomas Dye on the board. So they have, it's not on the board, they have an education working group over there. So there is a delegate from Harvard Westlake who is an employee, a delegate from John Thomas Day who is an employee of John Thomas Day, that serve on this education group and both get information to the board and take neighborhood council information to those communities. So there's the sharing of information and to some extent the sharing of resources. I wasn't aware of that. I think it might be something that the neighborhood council might want to look at moving forward. And that might be an interesting working group that would work with Harvard Westlake to kind of figure out what these issues are. Because if you think about Studio City, Harvard Westlake, obviously, Campbell Hall, Oakwood, North Hollywood, Carpenter, Bridges, we have a number of schools within the neighborhood council jurisdiction. If we got a delegate from each of those schools, they would be far better versed than I am. My youngest is 21. I'm kind of past what happens with schools now. But if we had people that were education professionals that were working out some of these issues, they would be better served to do that. And selfishly, one of the things we need to do with every breath we take as the neighborhood council is get more community outreach, more community involvement, so there's someone to replace me when I don't want to do this anymore. And we don't have that right now. So I think that that might be an interesting model. and I will probably discuss that with Jeff and Scott and maybe come up with some sort of a motion, because that education working group at some point is a way for us to sort of figure out what to do with these pieces. So that was interesting to learn, and I admit that it's like calling around for job references. You only put people on your resume that are going to give you a good reference, right? I'm not going to put the person on that spits when they see me walk in their office. Adele?
Well, go ahead, Heidi.
Well, I'm a neighbor of their upper campus, and I would have a whole other story.
Right.
Okay. And the least of not, which is they took over Hacienda. There's a street called Hacienda up in the hills behind them. It was a residential street. Many years ago, they somehow took it over. Probably could do some research and find out. It may not have been too kosher, but somehow they did it. There's a gate there now. There's a whole neighborhood up there that is in severe high fire severity zone. The school told them they would have a key if there was a fire so they could get out. That key has never been seen in probably 10 years. There was a fire up there, then it fortunately didn't grow, otherwise it would have been horrible, but these people would have to, they have no way out. That is their only one street way if the fire is in a certain area. So, and I also can send emails of many violations that they've done with their current, it's a CUP, the only CUP I believe that they have on the upper campus is for their field lights. And there's an email of tons of violations on that.
It's equipment related.
Yeah, equipment.
But they brought that up to us, and I believe they fixed that. Is that true?
I have no idea.
Because we were told that they were telling us the war stories of climbing poles and the type of equipment they had that would actually figure out. So they brought that up to us as one of the significant problems.
Because they knew that you would probably hear about it. There's also noise. There was also noise complaints. All right, well, so basically, as far as we can take it is the conversation we had about the 4 buckets of activity. We found out some interesting ideas with another way to establish an education group. And that's really all we can do right now. We still need from them to get a calendar of events. They know in sum total how many games, how many practices happen by grade, by all of that stuff, right? They should be able to come up with a reasonably good plan. We've asked for it for 6-9 months now, haven't seen it, it's still out there. So I can't share that with you. But we do know that the people in your neighborhood, we told them we have 5 different constituencies. We have the people in the hills, we have the people on the valley floor, we have the business corridor, we have the river itself, because I think the river is enough of an initiative, that should be a stakeholder, and we have the day use people, right? So we have 5 different, the people that come in from the day to work, to go to school, to worship, to shop, whatever it is, those are all legitimate stakeholders. So we're trying to find a way to get everyone accommodated with benefit to the 3 points you brought up as what a CUP should do. We want to touch as many of those as possible. One of the things that's going to happen for the upper campus neighbors is they will have less activity. To what extent, we can't tell you.
We've also asked repeatedly for their master plan, 5, 10, 15, 20 years out, and they keep saying they don't have it.
Yes.
And that's.
I wrote one of those early ones when I was wearing a Solaros t-shirt with you.
Right. And tagging on what Heidi and Beth just said, one of the main problems, how do I say this? If we don't have a CUP that encompasses a few things, number 1, limiting their enrollment. Number 2, they can't take that pool out or that field out. They have to keep it.
You mean the one on the upper campus?
The one on the upper campus.
But see, I think...
Wait, let me finish. If we don't do stuff like that, then without a master plan, they could make it a boarding school.
Okay, let's.
They could make it, I mean, I don't want to speculate.
Yeah, but we are. Adele,
talk.
please, wait a minute. We're talking about access. You're talking about a boarding
I
school.
thought we were talking about the whole thing.
No, hold on a second. We're talking about a CUP for the lower campus. There is no CUP for the upper campus. If that's something that you choose to do, I've never seen a proposal that's been moved forward. The FEIR and the DEIR all say that the CUP only impacts this. Is there something pending I don't know about with a CUP for the upper campus tied to the lower campus?
Yes, for years, Save Coldwater Canyon has been asking them to do a comprehensive CUP. For
And
years. Well, do you see one?
Okay. No.
No.
But
that
this
affects the hillside too, because
get
what
it.
she's saying is, I know we're on access, but just what she's saying is they could increase their enrollment. They can just completely, go beyond what they should be able to be allowed to.
Go ahead.
So in the final, it specifically mentions that the conditional use permit for this property cannot be tied to any conditional use for the other property. It's parcel based.
Who says that?
It's in the FEIR.
That's them.
That's them.
The city says it or they say
The
it?
city says.
It's the city's work product. We went through this before. And as far as all these other points you keep making, there's 1,700 pages of responses to comments. So we're getting ahead of ourselves. They responded to everything that I've heard. It's in the final EIR. Forms, master plans, community plans, everything. It's all in there. What we're waiting on is Kimberly Henry's report to City Planning Commission. So in the meantime, if we can start to focus on conditional use permit as far as access and the things we can actually discuss tonight, I think our time will be better spent. Mind you, our last motion was 5 weeks ago, where we said to the applicant and to Council President Kokorian and to Nithya Raman that we wish to be involved, and to City Planning, that we wish to be involved in the crafting of the conditional use permit. And that's what we're trying to do. So where are we going astray right now and not accomplishing anything by talking about how bad things are at the upper campus? I'm missing the point. We're not going to be productive tonight.
Can I chime in?
Yes.
On this CUP, before we waste any breath deciding what we want in there, I would want to know how much say-so planning is going to have, because I'll use Sportsman's as the benchmark. So, in their CUP, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, are they supposed to have signs every 10 feet that say, be mindful of the neighbors, don't talk too loud, as if that does a crap load of any. If planning is going to, insists on those kinds of ridiculous items to be put in a CUP, it's a waste of time. So I'd want to know how much say-so we actually have, what planning is going to dictate on.
Well,
And also that schedule is really important.
The schedule is important.
So that's just not showing that Harvard Westlake, and I think that needs to be publicized far and wide, that they will not cooperate and tell us how much time is going to be given to their partners. I get all these postcards in the mail that show partner after partner after partner. As far as, if I look at all these postcards, I go, I don't think there's room for all the partners. So perhaps maybe rather than decide what access we want and whatever, maybe we should go, what percentage of time is there? And we want a percentage of that time. Maybe work backwards that way. Because if they won't cop to who's going to be there, let's just say, okay, we want to, I think what's fair and what's the benefit is this much access, this much time.
Kimberly, Jones have asked Kimberly for a copy of that report as soon as it's available. When we get it, we'll be happy to share it with you. It's stalling you, you'll get it from us.
Yeah, no, when we get it we're all looking for it.
Yeah,
I mean, allegedly, it's supposed to be 2 weeks prior, so that would be tomorrow.
Can I ask another foundational
Sure.
moment? This is kind of, old business, but it seems like, I don't know, I haven't heard anything more about it. What happened to those experts on hydrology, all those other things, trees and?
I have them all right here. The expert reports?
Yeah, did I miss that?
Well,
I don't
weren't
think
they
they've
sent
been
out?
there were some that were sent.
I have
that
I have the whole, I guess maybe I thought you guys had them. I have aperture safety, a valley fever expert, Menlo noise here for the turf, traffic, Brohard tree report. These were all the reports in response to the FEIR. Should I send them
We
to you?
put 6 of those, I think, in the links.
I don't
No, you
know
put it
how
from
to,
the
okay.
DEIR.
These
Were
are the new.
responses to the FEIR.
Yeah.
So this
How
is
do I-
different
how do
than
I
what was in
find
the
that?
DER, different than what's
Oh,
in the
you showed me.
FEIR.
Yeah.
These are the responses to the FEIR.
These are
Yeah,
the
we got
reports.
6 from Adele early on, and those are accessible through, if you go to the agenda.
9. There's 9 of them in the public shared drive, additional expert submissions. They're all
Okay,
there.
great, thank you.
So that's right on this
Every
link.
document that comes our way gets uploaded to
Okay.
the same drive it's been on all of the agendas. It's the same link. So
And that goes all the way back to the LA River Natural
Okay.
Park. Basically, it's a comprehensive look at every document that's ever been around about this piece of property since before Harvard Westlake was even on the radar when the early development projects were being floated.
what we don't know is if Kimberly Henry's report to city planning is going to make mention of the additional experts. So either she's going to mention them or not, we don't know.
And you guys have they've obviously seen those.
Oh, yeah.
Kimberly's seen all the new
Oh, yeah.
reports. So,
Many people sent them.
right.
So there could be new information or not.
So as far as what we were able to accomplish and what we were not, I think we got some clarity with regards to the discrepancy between what Harvard Westlake thought was going to happen and the way it was described by the city and the FEIR. There's some flexibility in there that would give more access with community input. There needs to be a working group that continues to work on that. And there are open issues in that we've not seen the schedule either on a weekly basis seasonally, because that will change with tennis and soccer and whatever else they have out there, right? There'll be different hours. We need to see what that looks like. I would just say prototypically by month. We haven't seen that yet. We've asked for it. And I know one of the things Alan has asked over the course of time is they do mention, I think it's 10 or 12 large events, and we don't know what those are. You know, we've been told it's not graduation, but what is it? And so we don't know what they plan on doing, and that's been a steady refrain.
Well, because we don't know and because they're not cooperating and answering our questions, and how can we move forward and in any way, shape, or form, other than saying, no, we don't, like we did the last motion. No, we don't approve this because you're not answering our question. It's pretty simple.
I didn't say that we got everybody home with 3 weeks of conversations. I said we got more information that clarified some of the issues that were out there. And honestly, to me personally, this is a workable framework moving forward, but somebody else may not like that. I don't choose to be part of the details of moving it forward. There'll be a different working group. All right.
When you just mentioned, Chip, about 10 to 12 events, the actual language in the DER says River Park events will include this is beyond sporting issues, alumni reunions, parent receptions, school meetings, and up to 30 special events per year with 500 to 2,000 people in attendance, and that's in the FEIR. So again, not knowing what even the scope of these events are, it's hard to, I think it's very hard to come to anything, but we cannot support in the present fashion. And I just want to clarify something, just so I understand. So are you saying that with the 4 buckets, that all of this has to do with access? And I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but do you feel that you have abandoned the idea of continuing to ask them for perhaps a redesign of the plan? Because I feel that from my experience over the last few years, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of people who live in Studio City feel that project is too big. Even the people who think it might be nice to have access think it's too big. So are you saying that you have abandoned that completely, and what you feel is the only workable thing that could possibly be garnered at this point is public access? So you say that's something we can work on, so let's put all our energy in that. Or if you were to come up with something that they said, okay, well, we'll give you a little more water polo time, which is how I always phrase it, does that mean that then they get the support?
They clearly would like to give us something either in terms of clarity. They would like to give us clarity, so they want our support. They want the neighborhood council support. We still have open issues here, and we still stand behind the motion that we did last. We can't support it with this many open issues. I would like to close the issues. I think there's some other elements outside of River Park that we could potentially secure in a negotiation that would benefit the community. But we're not there yet on this. They have told us time and again that they aren't going to change the size of it, and they don't need to. I can either sit with my arms crossed and keep saying the same thing over and over again, or explore what they are willing to talk about and see what that gets us. That's what I've done. It doesn't commit us to anything, but it does solve a lot of the neighborhood of the next door. They won't. Well, ask them. This kind of clarifies some of those questions that were out there.
You do.
I don't know who you're negotiating with on the Harbour Westlake side. Our problem's always been, over the years, we've been trying to work a deal with them. They have to keep going back, asking, we have to take it back to the trustee.
It's a Soviet-style negotiation.
Excuse me. The person who controls Harbour Westlake is Charlie Munger. If he doesn't agree, you don't get it. So when you talk to them, and this is the point that we made when we talked this week, who gives authority? Do you have any negotiations? You've been in business. When you talk to anybody in negotiation, you ask them, what is your authority? That is the question you need to answer. Do you have authority to negotiate with me? That's the prime question going in. That's what we'll be doing. Really?
Gotcha.
Thank you.
So that is the access, right, that we see right now with the
negotiations.
So then moving on to the other piece, there was a lot of conversation going on about the ZEV and the county area. We had a series of conversations going back and forth. One of the graphics we had showed a serpentine fence going on the ZEV hill. It turned out that was a cartographic mistake that was corrected in the FEIR. They showed us where to find that in the FEIR. We went back and forth with a number of issues with regard to the ZEV. With the agenda, there was a graphic that was prepared by them that is next to the agenda as a PDF, and there's 4 copies of it over there, which show the current use of the rented land, the leased land by the existing golf course. So this is the 17.1 acres. This is what the golf course does with it. It comes across the tennis courts. There's part of 6, 4, and 3, part of 3 holes that are there. And then there's this unsightly bulge here, which from the ZEV is a bunch of cement block, railroad tie walls. We've asked to get an overlay on this document of what they propose to do with their new design. We just got this last week. They haven't gotten us the overlay. But as we've been told, the fence on the top of the hill, and it will be a decorative fence, right? It'll be, I believe, that will be right on the very edge of the property. So it will not actually bisect the ZEV, the slope of the ZEV. So
the edge of the county property or the edge of their property?
The edge of the county property. We have, what?
Including the county property?
It'll be on the southern edge of the property. So it will be exactly where the current use of that same plot of land is by the golf course.
So on the county property?
On the county property that they will be leasing. That's where they're planning on putting the lease.
Do we know that for sure?
That's what they've told us, yes.
Told you? I'll be careful.
And I believe that's what the plans show. So what we've also asked for is to see the lease. We have seen the lease from 2019.
Yeah.
We have seen the lease from 2019. We have copies of it. That is actually the lease that was signed for the golf course when it was last renewed. We have asked to see what the current financial terms are and the dates in which the most recent lease went over to Harvard Westlake for this property, and have not seen that yet. That to me is a big open issue. We've asked them to give us the information on the Harvard Westlake side. Scott has asked the county, Scott has asked
Horvath, Barger, and flood control.
We've been on this for 6 weeks, easy, trying to actually get the financial terms. Because if it is not a fair deal, it would be hard to get behind the project if it was unfairly subsidized in the dark by the county. And we'd like to see what that looks like. And we're still waiting for that.
Are they still buying that piece of land?
We are trying to get clarity on that as well. And that apparently was I'll get to Jenna. It was as it was explained to me, and tell me if I do this wrong, because the acre they're talking about is for emergency access. That's where emergency vehicles would come in. The insurance company doesn't want to have emergency access on leased land. They want to have emergency access only on land that Harvard Westlake owns. And so the easiest way was them just to buy that 1 acre that's right there as the turnaround. If they don't do that, they could run a driveway between the field and the pool north, right out parallel to Bel Air. So they could get another access. The idea was to tuck all the vehicular traffic behind the fire station so it didn't disrupt the neighborhood. There's a way for them to solve that same emergency access, but it's more disruptive. Patty? Oh, wait, Jen's next.
Did you talk to them about?
Hold on a second, Patty. Jen's
I'm sorry,
next.
I thought you said that.
I did. I was wrong.
When you were talking to them, did they bring up the fact of the ramp onto the ZEV? Because I spoke to them and I said, can you take that out? It's unnecessary. We don't need it. And they said, well, that's up for discussion. We're open to that. We don't have a problem with that ramp. But they said there's a lot of people in the community that do want that ramp.
Right. And so answering the question of the ramp. So the ramp, Beth, the ramp that we're talking about, that Harvard Westlake indicates on the ZEV.
Leads to the full.
Yes, and it also leads to the open area that they're calling River Park, which would be an open area in front of the field houses. It's a big area. It also describes a smaller circle that people could use if they were walking it. We also, in the LA River Natural Park that Sleros proposed, was that 2000 that we proposed that? When did we propose LA River Natural Park? Was that the year 2000?
2008.
Okay, so that ramp that they're proposing, I was embarrassed to see, is the same ramp that we proposed 15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't want it, it could be taken out. It provides access. There's utility to it if this thing happens. If we're taking it out to spite them because we don't want the ZEV taken down, I mean, that's a dealer's choice. I mean, that could be figured out. That particular one doesn't need to go there, but it does enhance the amenity with people that don't want to walk all the way around. Because even though it's ADA compliant, It's not a handicap ramp. It's a ramp for people to walk up and down. So that could be taken out if you want. Hold on a second, Steve is next. Actually, I lied. Patty's next.
Just, and I apologize, refresh me. Is Is that proposal limit the access that we currently have to the Zev walkway?
No,
Not at all.
no,
And the ramp that's existing is not the one you're describing.
no, this, not the ramp that comes down with the ornate gate.
Right.
It would be 250 yards maybe, farther down the trail, and it would zig back up to the field houses and the turnaround and the courtyard and the open.
And then when that's locked off, that does not change the access for the public for the Zev Yaroslavsky.
No, because the gate, there would be a gate to that in their fence on their property when they closed it. No, there's no impingement other than you would take plants out for however big the DG or whatever they made it out. Patty.
Okay, so do you seriously think that there's no conflict in public liability accidents with sharing that drop-off loop with the fire department's ambulance and small vehicle exits on Valley Heart? I mean, it's like preposterous.
I yield to the fire department and let them figure it out. And I also firmly believe that you could sit there, they have enough money at Harvard Westlake, they need to have a staffer who does nothing but stand in front of the fire department and make sure that cars stop when a truck rolls.
In an earthquake, they're gonna do that, right?
Patty, I hear you, but the fire department, whatever the fire department says to go with me. Adele.
Thank you. Number one, I can't remember who, but someone from the city told me the reason they have to buy that piece of property is that if the county owns it, at any time the county could say, we need to put up a fire pole here. We need to do this. So they have to buy that piece of land, full stop. The piece of land with the driveway part.
Right.
They don't have to buy the whole acre.
Right.
They just would buy that. Number one. That's why it's not for insurance purposes, and it may also be for insurance purposes, but they have to buy it because if the county owns it, at any time the county can take it back, full stop. That's one. Two, the reason I think we don't want the ramp has more to do with the ZEV and the integrity of the ZEV. Here's the problem. One of the big problems I'm now having with the whole project, because I just realized this is what's going to happen. Every living creature will be killed. So if they can't touch the ZEV, maybe we could save those bees and the birds that actually are there. And the bunnies. The bunnies are...
It's up for discussion.
But I'm just saying...
The ramp is up for discussion. If you want to push that, I'm just explaining what the point was.
I'm explaining, I
get your point.
The one thing about, are we doing it out of spite? No.
Okay.
Nothing I'm doing...
We're doing it for the bunnies.
Westlake is out of spite. It's all about the environment, the animals, the trees, the neighborhood, the air, and which leads me to my final question. In your last motion, we said, we can't support it because all the experts have not weighed in. Now the expert testimonies have come in. Are you all reading them and looking and seeing what you think about the expert testimonies versus what's in the FEIR? Because that would be, maybe this meeting's not about that.
But we still have these other issues as well.
Okay, but sometimes it feels like you move the goalposts on me a little bit because that came up, the experts came up, and that occurred to me. That was in the last.
I don't have an exhaustive review of the countermanding.
So, but maybe it would be good to divide and conquer the work because it's quite a lot of work.
Go for it.
So as far as our wanting to wait for the work product of the additional experts, just like the experts that submitted in the D and in the F, there's responses to those. We did not analyze the experts. We read the responses and what the city's position was, and our feeling, as I understood the motion, was we were waiting to see the city's responses, if any, to additional expert testimony. And if it changed the staff, the report from staff to City Planning Commission.
But so you're not actually going to look at the experts and make some determination yourself?
No. Who here as a PhD or as a biologist, an arborist, a scientist of any.
But you can read them and have,
The people that wrote the reports are.
yeah.
And the city's responses, the city made responses to those.
It makes sense that whatever the city says we have to go with, we can disagree with the city.
I understand that. That's what the experts did. And like I said, and I'll say it again and again and again, we're waiting to see Kimberly Henry's responses, if any, to the additional reports from the experts.
But we may disagree with that, because in the DEIR.
Okay, but
and
let's.
the FEIR,
But we don't know yet. We haven't heard them.
there are arguments.
Can we wait to hear what they say first? We're just gonna waste time.
What you're saying, are you saying that whatever the report comes, that's the final word on it, whatever the city says?
No, I didn't say that. I said I'm waiting to see if the city even responds to additional expert reports, or that might be something that happens in the appeal process outside of us. We haven't seen it. So I'm not saying anything other than we haven't seen it, and hopefully they'll be out in a day or 2 or 3. And then the responses were very clear in the F as to the experts. They were all shot down very substantially. And we'll see if the city then responds, except for, of course, a few. We'll see if the city says, oh, well, that's new. Maybe we didn't, consider that, and hold on. And that's what City Planning Commission is going to do. The City Planning Commission is not going to read the hundreds of pages of the expert testimony. I can assure you that. They're going to read the staff report. I suggest we do the same if the staff report even acknowledges there were additional experts.
So there are 3 outstanding points on the ZEV issue. 1, do we get rid of the ZEV ramp for the bunnies, or do we want to keep that ramp that makes the shorter loop for the old and the young who might like a smaller path? Right, so so it's still, and again, dealer's choice. I think probably they would get rid of it if there was a hue and cry to get rid of the ramp. I could argue that it actually makes the facility, if it ever gets built, more useful. The other question was, it doesn't actually encroach on additional ZEV land, but if you look at this, is it too far south? They could move it farther north. But if they move it farther north again, they're moving it closer to housing. It was actually moved farther south to move it away from the housing. So what do you want to do? I know you want to make it smaller. If it doesn't get smaller, that is kind of the conversation that we're left with. And the other is we don't know what the financial terms are. So we need to find out what the financial terms are. I mean, if they could buy an acre of land cheaper than I could buy an acre of land, how do I feel about that? Probably not great. So we want to find out and see what that looks like. And we don't know. So we still have open issues on the ZEV. Many are solved the same as we had with access. There are a couple issues that are solved and defined, but still a whole bunch of stuff that's open. We had the CUP. And the other stuff we talked to him about was how could they sweeten the pot? I mean, to Alan's point, right? So it's actually referred to as the Soviet style of negotiation, when you don't have the decision maker in the room. We've all been through that when we bought a car. Let me go back and talk to my manager. So you're wasting all of your emotional energy dealing with somebody in the room that doesn't actually, no matter how good your question to the close is, no matter what you do, that doesn't matter because someone else who's uninvolved emotionally is making the decisions, right? That's what they're doing. What you can also do in a situation like this, when you're stuck with an intractable problem, right? If they're saying, we want to make it smaller, no, we're not going to change it. If we're stuck on this, what else could you possibly do? And this was hypothetical to find out where potentially, looking at the 5 stakeholder groups in Studio City, people who live on the hills, people who live in the valley, the river, the business district, and the day trippers that come in, right? Keeping all of them in mind, what else could we move onto the table to negotiate that wasn't there before? If they're saying, I'm not touching the river park as it's proposed because I'm waiting to hear back from the city and I think I'll get it, but I really would like your support. Giving me half answers isn't going to do it. So I was wondering what they might be able to put on the table to give us reason to change our mind on the fence. Doesn't hurt to ask, right? You know, give me the fine ox, whatever it would be. So we went to them. Can I finish? And then you can ask. So we went to them with a couple other big issues to see if they could throw something our way, which would contribute more community benefit. So the answers that we brought them with are the 29 acres on Coldwater that they were originally going to build. Would they put an in perpetuity conservation hold on that? Would they do 50 years? Would they do 20 or 30 years and tie it to the growth rate of the tree canopy on the river park? How could we talk about turning that into a 29 community park? That might be of interest. It's not acre for acre. Hillside is not as valuable for recreation as ground, but it's 17 acres here, 29 acres there. That was part of a conversation that frankly didn't really go. It went well, to Alan's point, early on. And I think basically the trustees kind of slowed things down on that.
Are you talking about, when you say River Park, using that little...
The 17-acre piece, what they call the River Park.
What do you think?
The natural park. You're talking.
Harvard
You're not
Westlake.
including the ZEB in that. You're talking about what is
Yeah, the 17,
flat, not before it slopes.
yeah, the 17 acres that Harvard Westlake owns or is leasing is the project we're talking about. Right?
So, because when you look at the map and you actually see what they're calling River Park, aside from the little path, there's a little triangle of land that's in between the gym.
But the whole thing is also called, the whole thing is also called the River Park.
that
too.
the material
So
of what we're talking
about?
about?
Yeah.
Of course it is.
I don't want to, so what is your,
What is it you're talking that they're going to commit to 50 years doing what, where?
Up the street.
across the street on Coldwater, there's 29 acres where a bunch of years ago they were going to put a parking garage.
From the main campus.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things we went to him with a big ask is give me that forever. Say you're never going to build on it and give it to me as a natural park. Right? And so that was one of the thoughts we had. The other was, I want you guys to, Harvard Westlake, I want you to do away or don't do away with the ramp that gives access from the ZEV to Coldwater. And like everything else with this project, I will get you, but only when I'm done. There is a ramp on ZEB that goes up to Coldwater, right? 50-50. Do we want it to have access to the river? Do we not want it because it's going to bring, you know, an unwanted element, those yuppie Erewhon shoppers into the neighborhood? I mean, right? So they would go probably either way on that. That we probably made progress on it.
Their decision, I thought you told me that that was part of.
It wasn't me telling you everything. It was part of the master plan.
Right.
It is part of the master plan.
But it's not Harvard Westlake's decision, if the city, that's. Like,
I
they
don't know. They would potentially lobby with us to save them millions of dollars and not build it. But so that got done. The other thing we talked to them about is improvements on Valley Heart. Is that on top of the ZEV? Improvements on Valley Heart. So right now, there's no fence, it's falling down, the street's falling down, the sidewalk's intermittent, there's terrible drainage. There is not really much of a gate at the far end to the vehicle access, and it's very porous for security. Would you guys move the same fencing that exists on the top of the concretized channel and put fencing from what would be their southwest corner on Bel Air and the top of the ZEV? Would you fence that all the way out to Coldwater or the apartment building, whatever goes first? Building a nice, it doesn't need to be as grand as Joe's gate going down by the fire station, but there should be a gate over there that gives easy access, but is more formidable than a swing pipe, right? So there would be a way to lock that up in the same way that MRCA, which currently locks and unlocks the gate every day, or ultimately if it's Harvard Westlake Security, would they put that gate in over on the apartment building side, on the west side, and also on Bel Air? The residents of the neighborhood walk through the neighborhood. by Bel Air, by the gate to the golf course, and crash down the hill with their dogs. That needs to have more access that's safer and less damaging, and there would have to be a gate there. Would you guys do that hardscape? There would need to be a curb. We also need to have a sidewalk, because now that people are going to be doing this loop, going down the Zev, coming back up the hill, walking back to get access through the Bel Air pedestrian gate, which you currently can't do because it's a third green, right? So there needs to be a sidewalk there, because right now it's crumbling asphalt curbing. We'll work with CD4. Would you guys undertake the expense of that if if the city doesn't respond? So that was one of the other things we put together. You'd also have to landscape that in such a way that it looks familiar or similar to, on the other side of Fulton, on the north side of the bank. If you take a look, there are mature Toyon hedges over there. It's a native plant, it's a keystone species, really important for habitat, and you can't get through it. It doesn't need to be watered, it doesn't need to be maintained, and it is a really important plant, and it is a really strong privacy hedge. So they would have to supplement along the residence areas more planting. So we asked them that question.
And
what else do we ask them? And also, would you help us with other projects like this river park that we're talking about, where if we could stop talking about this, we would actually start at Fulton and run all the way to Tahunga and end up having a river park, that would actually go for Studio City, giving us a true riverfront park. Would you guys help us with that financially? Maybe pay for some of the technical stuff, maybe pay me a layer, some number of hours to do some of the work on that. We were getting along well with that, and then that also sort of got pushed on hold. So if they gave us all of that stuff, does that sound cool? Does that sound like something that would be something that the committee would like to look at? Or is it still one of those things where the committee just doesn't want to play based on the fact that there are other problems? You wouldn't even want to go down that road. What do you want, Patty?
So by doing all this, we're accepting that Harvard Westlake will not downsize the property. We're just saying, you said no, so okay, no.
In this particular context, checking our options, besides a wing and a prayer that they're going to end up being told to make it smaller, yes, I'm exploring other options. I'm not committing anybody to anything, but I'm having a different conversation than the one that's getting no place. So yes, that's why we're doing it, and that's why we're sharing, so everyone gets a full look at the potential solutions here.
If they do downsize, everything we're talking about is still valid. So does not foreclose on any ability to downsize all the items that Chip and this committee
I just don't want to come across like, okay, you said no, so we're going to accept that.
We aren't even coming close to saying anything remotely like
Yeah,
that.
I mean, they're very aware that we currently have 5 motions not in favor of this project, and this neighborhood council was silent for 4.5 years. It wasn't until May of last year that anyone did anything. The NOP, there was never any kind of engagement on this project by the neighborhood council.
Was this where you were asking them to beautify too? Is it this segment?
Yeah, the other section we talked about, and I talked about this as well, is if you take a look, if you go down to Whitsett, where the bike path on the south side, right, by Staples, where that bike path comes up.
By Coffee.
Yes, by Coffee Bean, exactly. As you walk up that bike path, it's 60 steps up the hill to there's a triangular piece of land, which is, there's a triangular, wash your hands. There's a triangular piece of land that is, there's a triangular piece of land on the river described by the river and the bike path. So it abuts on its foot, it abuts Whitsett. It has a long leg that runs across the river, and the hypotenuse is described by the bicycle path. It's a really big piece of land that has a couple volunteer native shrubs and a eucalyptus, but no one's ever touched it. It would be one of those places where, Lori and I have talked about this a bit, when a developer cuts down oak trees and owes us 4 for 1, but can't put them on the property, that goes in that bucket of I owe ya. There is a Forest Service database of trees that are owed by various developers. If we are able to get a bunch of oaks and a bunch of trees for free of size from the forest, we could put them in there and either do it on our own dime, or that's one of the other things too that we asked Harvard Westlake to do, and they agreed that that would be something they would absolutely do in keeping with the other sort of vegetation. So those are the other things we talked to them about. So let me see what the board feels about this first. So we've talked. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay.
My feeling on it is having that dialogue is critical, because otherwise you don't, the neighborhood council has really no say. You know, we rely on the city, but we can also rely on good faith with Harvard Westlake as, you know, what is it? Trust but verify. Right. But I don't feel, at least my feeling as someone on the committee, that discussing those things necessarily means we're rolling over on the other stuff. I think having the dialogue gives us the access. I'm personally committed to believe that we can convince them to eliminate the PFAS, the artificial turf. So now suddenly, you know, when someone says, well, we need to remove the plastic covered field, you know, that's one area to downsize. Well, if it's suddenly grass, it's now open, you know, it's a positive thing.
Right.
And I think having the dialogue with them, I personally am convinced that I can talk them down the wall on that, on the PFAS, and give them an alternative that makes sense. But from a business point of view, you know, it's what's in their best interest. In their best interest right now, it's PFAS. It's the fields, artificial. They need to have something put in front. But if you don't have the dialogue, no one hears any options. So I like the fact that at least there's discussions on all these things, because I think a positive dialogue is critical versus just putting up the wall and saying, we don't want to talk anymore. Well, that's fine. I mean, they could close the whole facility.
Or they could potentially go ahead and do what they want
without
any feedback from us.
Yeah. So dialogue to me is what it's all about.
Lori, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. We have to have a dialogue. I agree with Richard is saying. Michael, sorry. Close to you, last name, right? Yeah, I agree. We have to have a dialogue. Absolutely. But I was also wondering, you know, we have the neighborhood council, we've got Save Weddington, we have the residents association, we have Solaros. Is there any way the four groups can somehow get together, agree, and I feel like like Harvard Westlake is in a position now to divide and conquer. Every group is talking to them, but we're not doing it together. And I don't want Harvard Westlake to view us as weak because we're not unified somehow.
Sorry, the three groups are working together. Solaros, SCRA, and St. Weddington are working together, taking meetings together.
Right, I know you are, but what about the neighborhood council?
Well, there's two groups talking to them, right? There's that consortium, and there's the neighborhood council.
We'd be happy to work with
The neighborhood council has a responsibility to represent all stakeholders.
Right. Okay.
And so because of that, right, we can't lock in.
Yeah.
They're the biggest employer and the second biggest real estate holder, landowner, other than where we're sitting in Studio City. Right? I mean, they're legit. If we don't represent fairly their position on this issue, that what's it called? Cure and correct. It basically will then legally it'll completely invalidate anything we do if we're not actually living up to the charter.
Got it.
So that's why we can't in lockstep move forward. But it doesn't mean that, and we're not there, right? But it doesn't mean, let's say we got something that we love and we said, yes, we'll take that. The neighborhood council will before August 24th, put a motion together saying that based on the fact that you're giving us a 29-acre farm, you're going to landscape the entire river from Fulton to Lancashire at your expense. And, you know, and you're going to change it to, and you're going to do that. So we'll take that and we'll now support it. That doesn't mean that the other group still couldn't go for more concessions.
Okay.
But this is the Neighborhood Council for Studio City, and this ad hoc is called the ad hoc for the Harvard Westlake River Park project. So conflating all these other projects, which are all laudable, and I wish all of them would happen, it's sort of like what Patty said, rolling over and saying, well, this is going to happen, the city's going to do whatever. The city can say something, there's lots of things the city has said, and then the public fights back, whether it's lawsuit, whether it's through influencing their politicians. But offering a lot of shiny objects and giving up on this is not what this community wants. And this is the neighborhood council of this neighborhood.
Right.
And what this neighborhood is very concerned about is the noise, the traffic, the construction, the size and scope of this project. And to bargain that all away for these very laudable, every one of them laudable. And as far as you mentioned, Joe, that I believe you said last night, Chip, that, or I don't know if it was Scott or Chip, said when asked, Harvard Westlake, when asked, why not put it in a grass field? They go, oh, well, we talked to our sports department and that's a no-go.
Yeah, but the question is, who's the real decision
Yeah,
maker?
so I'm just saying.
And if it's the trustees, there is a good legal reason why they shouldn't put it in.
Put what in?
It's
Well,
a different
remember,
rule than just
as far as the artificial turf, and we spend a lot of time on it, they're not going to be laying down the turf for years.
Yeah.
It's going to be banned by then,
That's
or
my
it
feeling.
won't. If it's not banned, they're going to lay down the turf. If it's banned, they're not going to lay down the turf.
Right.
So
Unless there's enough hue and cry because of the toxic chemicals from the parent body that they don't want it, right?
it'll either be banned or.
We don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, but that'll be a Harvard Westlake decision. That won't be a city planning commission decision. And we waste a lot of time trying to figure out a way to convince the city to stop them from doing it while the state is trying to figure out a way to stop them from doing it. So I think we should just move on from the turf onto a different.
Well, I wasn't talking about it.
Okay.
So how do you feel about, I mean, just in terms of what we've laid out, where the access piece is and where it's stuck, where the ZEV piece is where it's stuck, they get a gold star for behavior from their favorite teacher on CUP across the street, right, at Beverly Crest, right? So they have that, and that's the only place we can go to. You know, we know that they, I mean, how do you feel? And then we've had the other conversations with nothing binding. What are your observations at this point?
I think all your asks are good, but I beg to differ with Terry, who I feel is pushing a lot of, or insinuating there's a lot of power in this body. I don't agree. The power is with your organization. Have you gone to the people that, Harvard Westlake did a brilliant move. They did a divide and conquer to the neighborhood. Okay, so the divide and conquer was after they tried to get their parking lot from hell built, that got shut down, and somehow they had a little deal waiting on the side, which was Weddington. Okay, all those people up there are so glad that that project is down here. They're all quiet now. So a lot of them are quiet because they don't want it to come back in their neighborhood. The point that Chip brought up, which in my neighborhood I could care less, but I'm on this body, and I think it's a good point. You need to embrace these people. Is that was it 29 acres? That needs to be, Harvard Westlake needs to sign off on that.
You're doing.
Okay, but I'm just saying they need. I'm just saying they need to, and I think the power with this body are the questions that you've asked and getting those non-answers publicized out to the community that Harvard Westlake has stonewalled on this. That's what's important. Whether you vote a motion, I think that's immaterial. I think that it's you guys who have the organizations need to get 1,000 people, whatever it is, to these meetings. Because that's what I saw last time when it was in Heidi's neighborhood. There was a hell of a show. That's what shut it down. The neighborhood council didn't even show up because of a petty fight between this guy and those two. And they screwed over a whole neighborhood, So anyway, I just think that, like I said, the power is in your questions, the non-answers, publicizing that. And we're still waiting I have yet to know who gets to say so on the CUP. I don't even want to bother talking about it. So I know from the city is their most important thing that we put up those signs every 10 feet that says don't disturb the neighbors, or we get to have a real conversation. And I think for me, that the ask of those trees and dealing with all the shortcomings in our neighborhood with the street falling in, I think that's all valid. And I don't think it's saying that we don't want it smaller. We all want it smaller. But I think that's up to you guys to go rally a big group of people to go yell and scream to make it smaller.
Jeff, if I misrepresented anything that we discussed or missed anything?
No, I don't think so. Dialogue is very important. I mean, for so many years, we haven't had open dialogue with Harbor Westlake, and they are actually a stakeholder, just like all of you are. So, we need to take into account their perspective and their points of view on these different things. So it was very beneficial to at least hear their side, because I've always had misgivings. I'm very concerned about the Sportsman's Lodge going on at the same time, and the Harbor Westlake project, streets being, covered with dump trucks and all that stuff, and we've communicated, that to Harbor Westlake. Well, we did to Midwood too, but to no avail. I don't think they really care. But the point being is that it's good to have dialogue. It's good to, if we can get concessions out of them that they normally would not give up, I mean, that's a good thing for the community. So they're a stakeholder. We need to hear their side of the story. And we're going to leave it at that. So we want to keep the door open. We want to listen to these people just like we listen to you. We want to formulate maybe some concessions where they'll give in. So anyway, it's been a good dialogue. So
Jeff, you're saying about this. Scott said up until 4 months ago, or up until a while ago, that all of a sudden this talk has been had. Adele and I attended the very first meeting that Harvard Westlake had in 2019.
I'm speaking of the neighborhood councils.
Right, but what I'm saying is that as reaching out to Harvard Westlake, I've had half a dozen meetings with David and Ari and Stacy. And at every meeting for 2.5 years, they said the same things they said to you. We're not budging. So it's not that people haven't spoken to them. They've always said from the beginning, we're not changing our grip.
And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is the neighborhood council hasn't really been involved with dialogue with that side. And I think it's important to hear all voices. That's all I'm saying.
Heidi, do you have any questions about what we're doing or any observations?
I have a question. The statement that this neighborhood council presented was that we are not in favor of the project because there's a list of issues that needed to be addressed, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just a little concerned and curious that, and Heidi has brought this up a little bit, that some of the 4 bucket issues was to plan those issues being addressed. So that we're not, there's no suggestion that, hey, you give us some of these in the buckets, we'll forego some of these on our list.
No, we've never discussed
hydrology. I'm just clarifying that because
no. I mean, they're hoping that they will get us to modify our position and either go neutral or approve, support the project. But they're giving us nothing at this point to do that.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to make sure that what I will like to really get right now is that the proposal has specifications, and it's it's less than 20 days to the next planning meeting, and they've supplied none of those answers. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it's due
I think
tomorrow.
that's the other side of the story of good neighbors.
Well, the issues that we raised in the motion of hydrology and greenhouse gases and, all of that stuff, those were our issues. They weren't, that wasn't requiring them to respond to that.
Well, but it's the neighborhood council provision.
Yes.
So I'm just saying at what point do they go, hey, we're just being ignored totally. We've all spent a lot of time on this and a lot of really good energy. Just want to not hide or to us in the bigger picture.
Well,
I just want to make sure we understand when
the answer to
when they're
that,
saying we're not going to do it. They're not going to do that. They might not do that either. And the concept of us being neutral, I'm just wondering historically where that puts us. And we were neutral. We didn't say yes. We didn't say no.
well, I'm not worried about our legacy. I mean, but
In this respect,
their answer to this.
the thought that Harvard Westlake is all of a sudden such a prominent member of our community. They're running a good, excellent school, but they're running a business. And I know I've heard them say, well, listen, it's nonprofit. And it's okay if you're a nonprofit, but I have like $40 million in my pocket. That's a nice nonprofit. And I'm concerned about the neutrality to the point where.
But there is no neutrality, right?
Clearly there is.
No, there is no neutrality. The board is on the record not supporting the project. And we have 4 that oppose the project. And there's no motion in front of the committee that will be taken to the board now to change that because we don't have any reason to do so and to change our opinion. We've asked for some clarification on issues of the access. We got some clarification on the ZEV because there was a lot of bad information out there and we spent a lot of time digging through that, which we could have put elsewhere. We're trying to figure out what the CUP might look like and who should help us. We're getting no help from CD4, but we were able to ascertain that there is another group like this one that will vouch for them being responsible parties to a CUP.
At the last CUP, Scott came down and then spoke against the Sportsman's Project. As Steve just said, next meeting is in less than 20 days. Will the neighborhood council have someone, if it's not Scott, he mentioned last night he may not be able to attend all day. Will someone be appointed to go down and present the current motion that has been passed that says that at this point we're not in support? Because at the beginning of that meeting, we will not know what the CPC is going to do.
You're right. And we won't know before, whatever the current motion is, and at this point, you know what it is, and at this point, there's no move to change it, right? It would be great to change it because it would mean something changed, but we haven't seen that yet. The current plan is for someone, I thought, Scott, to read our motion at the CPC.
I'm just saying, if Scott can't attend, then of course it should.
So yes, is the answer to your question.
Someone will definitely be at the CPC.
Of course.
Representing.
Of course.
Okay, that's fine.
But if it works as well as it did last time, right? Scott goes out and is eloquent and then it's like, yeah, that was great. No, we're going to approve it.
The issue of speaking at the City Planning Commission was not about going to Van Nuys City Hall. The issue is at what point in time will the neighborhood council be able to speak? And if the neighborhood council has to speak last, it may not be possible to do it in person. It may have to take place over Zoom. That's it. And we may be able to change or craft something slightly different after we see the findings. And there may be some additional information to put into that.
Couldn't you make sure someone from the neighborhood council board is there?
We said yes. We said yes. The answer is yes. Take yes. Go with it. Heidi, trying to get back to you. Do you have any observations or anything about the discussions we've had?
Well, yes. I'm kind of wondering why we met tonight, because it seems like we're a little bit on hold to see what the Kimberly's going to write. And it also seems a little strange that we would have these expert reports, but we're not going to look at them because we want to see what the city says about them. Well, we know what the city's probably going to say about them. I mean, most
But
likely.
how are we going to look at expert reports considering they don't consider us have any ability to decode these experts?
Well, these are reputable people.
I know, but if we're going to look at them and then weigh in and decide which expert is correct, how's the neighborhood council supposed to do that? I mean, I could look at these sound reports and I know, I
Well,
mean,
you could look at the sound report.
okay, but all right, so I know what Harvard Westlake submitted was bullshit.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, but who am I? Just because I've been doing sound for 45 years, I'm not an expert because I don't get paid. I don't get paid to write reports.
So what you're saying
was
is our
stated, but that you saw, what did you say? It was like, in the meeting, was it which meeting? There's so many meetings. The sportsman's like, everybody, comments are all dismissed by the city.
Right. And that the experts are wrong.
And they'll continue
And come to
doing
Studio
that.
City and we will show you how your experts were wrong on just about everything. But as far as that particular point of what were the reports that went in, hydrology, traffic,
Safety.
turf, safety, I mean, you all have access to all the reports. Who here has read them? And let's hear your elevator pitch for each of the reports and why these experts are to be believed. We didn't do that.
But if we did, it
would be a pointless endeavor.
Because we're not qualified.
Right.
Well, according to the city.
According to the city, who is making the decision?
It doesn't make sense.
No.
I have more education than any of the city planners.
That's why
For
you
sure.
don't work for the city.
Your comments, and no offense, and everyone else who made comments that were the responses in the final EIR, as I said to the zoning administrator, they were all debased gleefully.
Not all of them.
Okay.
Not all of them.
Almost all, the majority of them, including the experts, were all dismissed. So what's the point? Why do we keep focusing?
Because it's not finished the process, Scott. The process of the CPC is supposed to be a public hearing for the public to say, I disagree with the FEIR. I disagree with the DEIR, and I disagree, and I may not be an expert. However, I'm giving my first-hand testimony as a resident for a number of years on this street. And even if the CPC at that meeting doesn't go, oh, wow, she sounds smart, let's go with her. Even that doesn't happen. What it does serve as public testimony that goes into the record so that when this does go to Plum, when it does go to city council, because remember, CPC, all they're doing is approving what the city is approving, saying, yes, this can go on to be voted to actually be approved to build. Their approval means nothing other than what is the CPC? It's supposed to be the citizens. They're supposed to be our representatives representing us, overseeing the city. That's what commissions are. And they're overseeing the city's work. However, what we witnessed was that you're right. Are they going to read 16,000 pages? No. They read the report. They're the experts in the field. 30% on your staff, all under 35, but they're the experts in the field. If they recommend the project, you're right. They're going to rubber stamp it. But we need to be there so that when the report of that day goes, they say 150 people came down. We have to fill out the speaker cards there, unlike the Zoom. And you have to put where you live and your zip code. And that will be the next report that goes, it's a horrible process. It's frustrating. But it is part of the process. So it is important that we represent. It is important. I think we need to stand up in exactly a very eloquent way.
Right, but I'm
45
saying
years of
it's
experience.
to waste time
Here and now.
browbeating this
But you're not saying
body.
you're not going to come.
I didn't say that.
No, I'm asking-
What I'm saying is time would be better served to take the bullet points that take the non-responses from Harvard Westlake on these great questions and come up with, let's call it a green postcard and throw it back in their face. He gave you ammunition to go clobber them. That's for you to do because you're an outside group. This body isn't going to do that.
But so
Why would you? Why
can't you say these are the bullets?
Because
This
you
is
have-
why we're not supporting.
But we've now jumped from PFAS, PFOS, and valley fever to this document. And the reason we didn't go through, to answer the question, why we're not exhaustively running through all of the expert reports is because we're not qualified and it won't go anywhere. And I'm glad they were done. Thank you for representing me. And I'm glad they went to the right people. Hopefully Kimberly Henry and her staff will look at those and consider that information and perhaps change their mind. But if we sit there and do an inorganic chemistry class, it's not going to make any difference. All right, so what I want to do is now go to Alexander and say, I know that my guess, Alexander, is that you have difficulty getting your head around saying yes to anything that's got 3 acres of artificial turf on it, no matter what is on the rest of the property.
Yeah, I mean,
characterizing that right?
Yeah, the challenge right now, I think, is to present something to Kimberly Henry right now that packages the recent results that we got from their same, by the way, their same experts, their same laboratory. We simply went to that laboratory with that same sample and we got results that are different. So we can call out Ari, who sat here and said no PFOS. Yes, PFOS is there, Ari. PFOS is there, Mr. David whatever his name is.
Yeah.
So the fact is, we need to publish this to Kimberly Henry right now, and then I'm going to get ready or run it by anybody here as to how we also, as we've stated, must get on the record on the 24th with this information. I don't want to turn it into a chemistry class. We can't turn it into something that is also going to be, as it's been pointed out, just get into minutia of it, because it's weeds that I don't know. Maybe they will just state will oversee this as a non-starter because of the bill. But we right now we need to get it on record and in a way that is truly relevant and truly packaged in a way that's not a chemistry nightmare.
But just to clarify, the whole idea of the minutia and the chemistry and the parts per million and all of that, I think that's completely appropriate for the planning department and those folks. My comments about that yesterday was, if we're going to a fine arts sophomore in high school and trying to get her to understand that artificial turf is bad, going to 20 parts per million is going to end up going right over her head.
No, the way
we
to
need
do
to
it,
actually make that different audience, a different delivery system.
We had a fabulous experience last night. We had a young lady come to us and help us understand what it's like to be a student at Harvard Westlake right now. A senior from Harvard Westlake came to us last night and listened to this information that's brand new. It's really interesting. And she was blown away. I don't really want to say much. I want to learn from her, but she's very interested in talking to all the kids at Harvard Westlake, but not about PFOS and PFAS. She wants to talk to the football players by name and say, hey guys, did you know that it's like aspartame down there on that green field? It's like asbestos down there on that green field. And everybody, 90% of the people who play on that green field are developmental brains and bodies eating up PFOS. And by the way, the field that is down there is that field turf product that they want to put in. It's one of the several. Anyway, so she was really lovely, very interested in learning, and said the inner sanctum of Harvard Westlake does not know. The students who really all of this serves do not know about their current field, what PFOS is, what PFAS is, and they don't know what's coming in their next play field over there across the river.
So I'll take that as turf is my #1 issue.
It could be. It actually could be. It's about how you package it. It'll be interesting.
I don't think they'll listen to the council on that.
I think it's going to have to come from the state. I mean, as we've discussed before, the problem is the city has relied. I mean, Alex sent something to Adele and me, and we went back and forth, and I happened to be at a place where I could look at a computer about artificial turf on a parkway. And I went through the municipal code, and I've planted for the past 35 years in multiple homes in the valley of my parkway with all kinds of stuff. I've never gotten a permit. I've been wildly in violation of codes, every single one of those homes, putting up stuff that gets over 36 inches. There are very specific rules. But for example, you can't use gravel or stones on the parkway, which I didn't know. You have to get a permit to use decomposed granite. It needs to be a certain bit back from the walkway and has to have a curb so people don't trip on it. The plants have to be under 36 inches and they have a plant list and all of this stuff. And you need to get permits for all of that. And they're very specific. If you put down artificial turf, you're good to go. It doesn't require a permit. Artificial turf on the parkway is the preferred solution for Los Angeles.
For now.
The city likes that. But
For now.
yes,
And
but
I
that's
get-
what we're talking about is now.
I didn't really finish talking.
Oh,
though.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I mean, that's fine, but if they are not answering our questions, then as a board, how can we, it just makes me mad that they are not answering questions. And so you saying, well, we're having this conversation. What conversation? What are they? The big stuff they're not, that sure, it's easy to say no ramp and yeah, we'll put trees here and there, but the big important stuff, they're being really quiet on. That should make you very concerned. And as a neighborhood council, we should say, you know what? You're not answering the big questions, then we are not going to support you. Because and they are a stakeholder and they're maybe the biggest landowner, but you know what? They don't pay a dime of taxes. So what do they contribute to our community? The kids go to Starbucks?
Contributions
I mean,
to the council office.
you know, so, I'm going off a little bit, but it's true. You know, I've dealt with them. I know.
Well, and that's the answer, right? We have actually discovered more issues, more information we don't have that we require to move forward than we did before we had this dialogue. So we had greater discovery by engaging with them.
Can we add one more question
Sure.
to
I think we're actually done, Peter. All the questions we have.
to Harvard Westlake from the neighborhood council?
Sure.
And I think it was Scott who might have mentioned this at one of the very meetings he spoke so eloquently. Try to put this PFAS thing to bed, since there seems to be, such a chasm. Why not ask the parents? So why not request that Harvard Westlake put out a poll to the parents and I'm serious, let this body choose what expert they would like to be included in the letter, and let Ari do whatever dance he wants to do. And this goes out as a poll to the parents, and it's anonymous reply. Okay. And we want to know what they say. That way the student body and the parents should know what the arguments are. And then we'll get off this topic. We'll see what this, as long as the parents know and the kids are informed, great. That's something we'd like to see.
Just real quick to that, back in 2000, the Harvard Westlake Chronicle students, back when they first put their turf in, were concerned. That was when the soccer goalies.
We have the article, yeah.
You have that article?
Yep,
okay,
yep.
so
we know.
So these new students aren't aware. They should just republish that chronicle.
Because there's a lot of new information.
But what they said to the kids was
wash your hands.
Just wash your hands.
Yeah. In the meantime, until the science really proves out, just wash your hands. And science has proved out. We all know that. They're hiring the white coats for hire type people to say there's no PFAS, and there are. That's who they are.
And Peter's point's well taken too. I mean, there's an urgency with time with Harvard Westlake. But what mechanism does sustainability use to get better education about artificial turf throughout the community? I mean, doing that sort of
do a survey.
Do a survey to every school. I don't care if it's put on a pole with a QR code.
Yeah.
And get to every single campus.
Not just Harvard Westlake, but
right.
Yeah.
Campbell Hall.
Yeah.
They all do
Campbell
it.
Hall.
That's a good idea. We should find a way to actually make that more broadly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think awareness,
Yeah.
And I have been.
they're going to make a pragmatic decision faster than the city ever will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trepidation right now with Campbell Hall and Notre Dame, because I've been in touch with their field people, and there are some Campbell Hall is right now due for their next round of field turf, because field turf loves the let's make that a 5-year, and we're going to upsell you to our next latest greatest. Oh, it doesn't have any PFAS. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Hey, so one of the questions I forgot to ask you last night, is there, out of the box with a benign testing protocol, you can show the stuff is inert, right? Out of the box with a more rigorous testing protocol, you can show it's not. But they can show, over the course of time, does it start to actually degenerate more quickly?
Absolutely.
So 5 years, it's much more toxic than is it 3 years?
It's off gassing right away.
Right.
It's immediately holds within the blade, the backing, and the infill if it's the rubber. The PFOS, which is a type of PFAS that is well above any, and APA says there is no safe level. And that moment happens, but then if you already stood here and said no water ever, not true, going to happen. But if no water, if it never rained and the item never breaks down and nobody ever touches it and it's just sat there, but as soon as you're starting to run on it and absorb it and touch it, it certainly can pass PFOS at a level that is unacceptable to the EPA and cancer causing immediately. But yes, it gets worse because it degrades, and that's something that is an inherent part of our disposable society and sales of products like these.
But also the test that Harvard Westlake did for the FEIR was not a strenuous test, and it still had 7 different kinds of PFAS in it that Teeter neglected to point out.
He just cherry-picked. He cherry-picked his own report. Yeah, right. We have it right here.
But we also sort of feel that the city is going to cover their own ass by letting them put the artificial turf down, whether or not it's the right thing to do.
Don't know.
Right?
Which is why I think we don't rely on the city.
We don't know.
So moving forward, the takeaways are, I will reach back out to Harvard Westlake and say, we'd still like to see, need to see, the distribution of practices and games between the two campuses so we can gauge what the level of activity from Harvard Westlake students looks like. Schedule. Yeah. So we need to see the schedule. We also need to see the schedule of non-sporting events. So we need to see that.
And are you going to ask for a copy of the lease?
Yeah, well, then getting to the ZEV, I don't know what to say about the ramp. They're going to have to figure out a survey on their own about whether or not it's important to keep that pedestrian ramp up against the clubhouse, but there's plenty of time for that. So that's still out there as dealer's choice. I don't think there's any appetite for asking them to move the field farther north to get it away from the ZEV, but we do want to see the lease. We want to see what the financial terms are there. Because if it's $1 a year in perpetuity, that would probably preclude us from ever supporting it if it was a giveaway. Ever. So we need to figure that out.
I bet it is.
Well, we don't know. We'll find out. And then, so it's really just those issues. Anything else?
I would love for you to add that they take out one field. I would love you just to ask again. Because if they took out that big field with the track around it, they would save over 100 trees. 100 trees. And some of them are 80-foot pine trees. I don't even know, more than 80 feet
Okay.
long.
That's still.
Does the committee feel that it's important to ask them to make it smaller, even though they said they won't, and they're going to wait to see what happens with this in the city? Is that a gating factor before the committee actually reaches out to them on the other issues?
I think if we're representing the neighborhood and that's where the neighborhood council, I say absolutely, because that is what the majority of the community, would want. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Size matters.
So, yeah, it's ridiculous.
What about the community up in neck of the woods? Because I know there were a bunch of people that I used to interface with, a bunch. There was that whole, your group, and they've all disappeared.
My group, what are you talking about?
Well,
Save Kohler Canyon?
Yes.
We've already written our thing and
I know,
sent it in.
but I don't see those faces here. That's it.
Because Sarah is in Philadelphia.
Okay, and
Are you talking about the board or
I don't
the
want to name,
people?
I don't want to name names. We could maybe have this the people, the neighbors.
The board or well, the neighbors,
Are they happy that it's coming down in our neck of the woods and they want to make it bigger?
why don't you go knock on their doors?
Well, I already know the answer to that.
Who are you talking about?
certain
Never
people.
mind, never mind. We'll
Okay,
take,
we'll talk about
we'll
it.
take this
We can
out,
argue.
we'll take this outside.
On the agenda. Because there was no motion on the agenda, that's why there's not a big crowd of people here.
No, I never see them come because there's
Oh,
just,
no, the last
there's
time
a bunch of,
you weren't here.
I've been around this for a long time. I've just noticed there's a bunch of people that, whew, it's not my neighborhood anymore.
I disagree, but that's pointless. I'm here. Save Boulder Canyon made their statement to the DEIR, the FEIR,
We're
so.
different.
And
We respect
no,
you.
no, believe me, a lot of my neighbors don't want this either. It's not maybe one or two people who might think maybe you're talking about. But anyway, back to the point at hand. I think we should ask them to take the field away.
I don't think it's gonna help though, if it's done prior to the planning commission meeting. I mean, I would be, I would say, yeah, even if the planning commission said, rubber stamps what they want to do, I still think at some point we should ask them. And I also think we should try and, I don't know, I mean, is there any hope of pressuring Councilwoman Rahman to help us broker something to reduce the size
The two
of the
things
footprint
we
of this
saw,
project?
the two projects, the Arts Drive and Sportsman's Residence. Arts Drive is like, right? It's bigger than it should be. Sportsman's Lodge Sportsman's Residence is just literally an unbelievable affront.
But it has housing.
And-
It has housing.
But her
Affordable
people,
housing.
want the house.
Saying, yeah.
her people came back, and what the CD4 rep said is, we want to thank the stakeholders for getting together and trying to work out a solution. She had the same thing to say about Arch as she had to say about Sportsman's. So from that, I'm inferring that she sees her role is to put the other people together, but not actually take a point of view on the issue.
Right, but
So
again.
no, I don't believe she's ever going to help us do this.
But again, that had to do with housing, those other projects.
She has not ever, to any one of the groups, when there were 4 separate groups that were in opposition, she would not take a stand one way or the other.
She's still complaining it's redistricting problem, they haven't had a chance.
So no, she is steadfastly avoiding the issue. The only thing she's ever done was help us when the FEIR came out and we had 1 week. She was able to give us more conventional timeframes, but that's the only thing she's ever done, which was just to get it back to convention, not to do anything special.
But I don't think it's about, if I may, I don't think it's about, will it help? Or is there a point? It's about us being in integrity and asking the question. It doesn't mean, listen, I have a lot of experience coming up against this board with motions that everyone thinks are stupid or whatever, and I get shot down. But I'm not going to stop bringing motions that I think are important. Because if I stop doing that, I'm not doing my job as a human being on the planet. I think as people, what we owe it to our community to push back in whatever way we can, because it is too big, and it's too big for the neighborhood, and that is the truth. Full stop. And if you sit here and say, well, we're gonna, no.
That's not what we're saying.
Okay, good.
There are also
Good, thank
multiple
you.
tracks. What I'm trying to figure out is, let's get some better information on access.
Got it. I got all that.
And
I'm
let's
just
get
saying,
some information on the
please
ZEV.
add asking.
I'm thinking I'd like, as opposed to boiling the ocean, and I don't have the time left in my life
I'm trying not to boil the ocean.
But I think if we sit out there and
No
bring back
PFAS,
in,
no plastic,
if we,
smaller footprint, I'm trying not to boil the ocean.
I don't have the time to go back, and I think it's a bad idea to sit there when they've already said, we're not gonna change it, we're not gonna do anything.
Okay, so she thinks it's a good idea.
Let me finish, please.
No.
We can wait and do nothing until after the city makes a decision. But they're saying to us, until the city makes a decision, we are not going to agree to change it physically because we think we're going to get what we want. So these conversations happen alongside, we disagree with that. I think it's too big and I don't think it should have artificial turf. But there's other stuff we can talk about. Hopefully the city comes to my rescue. I doubt it, but hopefully the city does. In the meantime, let's talk about this. If I start off every conversation with all the things we disagree with, let's just go for the first 10 things that we really don't like about each other and then see if we can get to number 11. Why don't I just say there were some huge issues on access. We don't feel that you're being completely forthcoming on your schedule. We would like to see that. And that's all we're talking about here. If they give me the full answer, nothing happens. It doesn't approve the project. It just gets answers as to access. If we go in and say, oh, and by the way, we want you to lose a field, lose a pool, and lose a gym, they shut down and we're not talking. Then it's not worth having the meeting.
Not if they want to build something, Chip. There is a mitigation, you know. And like, for instance, the opportunity to have a second pool above their existing pool is a reasonable thing.
But we're not talking about that because what they've said is until the city rules,
right,
we're staying with this plan.
Why anything to them? If they're only
because I want to get answers
to you're going to get, and you're going to negate.
This is information. This isn't a get, right? Right now, I'm trying to find out what are your plans for the property so we know better. Like, given what it is that you guys think you're going to get, how are you planning on using it? As opposed to coming in with a trunk full of things that I don't like about you. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, haven't you done that already, though?
No, now we're coming back in after sharing what the three of us were able to do in the time of the two boards, the two committees. Mm-hmm. Now we're coming up and saying, we did this. We didn't want to meet with them and not tell you guys, right? It's important that we be as transparent as possible. Mm-hmm. We weren't going to sit on our hands. We're out of time. We went in and had a dialogue with them. Some of the things were good. Some of the things were looking good and went the other direction, right? Somebody else got involved on their side. Other things are areas where we can still continue to work. So I think getting clarity on places where we agree is fine, but not talking about whether they're going to have the nutcracker and figuring out whether that's going to happen every December because I don't want to, because I have to talk about both pools, right? That just doesn't make sense. I want to get answers on access and I want to find out how much they're paying for this app. And then we can come back to the other issues because all the rest of it, I think, is up to the city. We've already made our points.
We could get a Public Records Act request on documents, in any kind of documents, emails, communications in connection with negotiating.
But I don't know if the neighborhood council can start doing PRAs on the county.
I don't think we've ever filed.
Well,
individuals can. I mean, we asked for the records. We've asked two county supervisors. Barger's office said she would help. Horvath's office says we're still looking into it. I spoke to Horvath in front of all of you at the SCRA and handed her homework assignment. And I think that was that May?
Yeah, it was.
And it doesn't take that long for a county supervisor to get the information about county land. So that's, I think, to Chip's point, and what we have on the agenda tonight, which we don't have a motion, and we have a hearing coming up in a couple weeks, and to change the motion, we have to go before the board again. It's not going to happen in the next board meeting. I think the thing to do is for everybody to make their list of what those additional questions are for Harvard Westlake. We share them directly, and you and the public, share them directly with Chip, because this is all the product of this meeting. Chip compiles the list, goes to Harvard, and then we can actually add or enhance our already approved motion if nothing else is substantive between now and the 24th to say the previous motion in addition to all of these unanswered questions and bullet point all the unanswered, the schedule, everything else you guys mentioned, the conservation easement, write it all down. And then we make that motion better. But if you're going to add something like we oppose the project unless they remove field B, it's like, that's not going to go anywhere.
How about this one? I got a good one. How about asking Mia Lair if she would make it a smaller project? Like, she's so good. She could, if she would make it.
Maybe they can make it 2-story.
Or maybe they can make it under the
and
ground.
affordable housing on top.
They could just sink it.
So you guys can ask her that.
No, I mean,
I just think the power in this is like, there's no power here. What power is asking these questions, getting the non-answers, take the non-answers, put them on postcards.
I agree.
Get another 100 people to show up at the meeting.
Yeah.
There's the power.
Do a questionnaire with the schools.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Well, Peter, to your point though about power, even though we've been organized and things like that, we each get 1 minute. We, as a group, they won't hear us as a group, but they will give the neighborhood councils 5 minutes.
And my point is, the neighborhood council never showed up the last time.
We got 3 minutes last time, and there were 10 items on the agenda, 2 of which were huge.
But that's 3 more minutes, like every.
Well, but okay, it's 3, and we know it's 3, so let's not say it's 5. It's 3. It's 3. He tried to get 4, and it took 30 seconds for them to say yes, and he went last.
Yeah.
So this is not a golden arrow that's going to happen with Scott's oratory. I've heard him speak.
But I will tell you, from the last 3 years of the Plum meeting, both in person in 2019.
But we're not talking Plum. We're only talking.
Is that they will harken back to the CPC to what neighborhood council showed up there. It will. Everything builds on.
You got your yes about 7 times, right? The existing motion will be read by some poor bastard that's going to wait and represent you for the neighborhood council. All right, that's what's going to happen.
And at Plum, we go first, and we get 5 minutes, and we can then fill in Plum as to what went wrong in the process up to that date, and we will have the real decision makers there, and will be more effective than speaking with the Sphinx at City Planning Commission, who is only listening to staff recommendations. That's the term of art. Staff recommends.
Yes, would you propose?
They did actually listen to what was said about violations of conditional use permit and bait and switches, but then someone in city planning jumped to the defense and totally, well, I'm not going to get into that right now.
Or adjourn.
Scott, I propose that we adjourn.
I second.
Or Chip. Not sure who I adjourn.
Okay, we adjourn. 8:25.